Number 3, Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, what economic benefits does the government expect from extending the mixed ownership model to 4 state-owned energy companies?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we expect a wide range of benefits will flow from this model. First, it will deepen the local capital markets and give mum and dad investors, KiwiSaver funds, ACC and the New Zealand Superannuation Fund better investment opportunities in New Zealand when those organisations, particularly those fund managers, are actually investing a lot of their capital offshore. Secondly, it will give companies in New Zealand access to the capital to expand from wider sources than simply the Crown. It will place better commercial disciplines on the SOEs. It will lower Crown debt. And finally, it will allow taxpayers' capital to be recycled into higher priority areas such as investment in infrastructure and the rollout of ultra-fast broadband.
Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you. Supplementary to the Minister. What dividends has the Crown received from the SOEs it is considering for mixed ownership?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I pointed out, the reason the government is proposing a mixed ownership model is for its wider benefits to the economy, not just because of the dividends of SOEs. However, over the past 5 years, ordinary dividends from the energy SOEs have ranged between $135 million a year and $432 million. They've averaged $312 million a year. This represents an average dividend yield of 2.1% on the current commercial valuations. The Crown has in addition received capital back through special dividends on 3 occasions.
Michael Woodhouse.
Supplementary to the Minister.
Order. I've called Michael Woodhouse.
To the Minister, what impact will the mixed ownership model have on future Crown cash flows?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, it will mean the Crown will reduce its finance costs and forgo some dividends because, of course, as an ongoing owner of at least 51% of these companies, it will continue to receive dividends. The budget included Treasury's projections showing that in the 3 years to June 2014, the 4 SOEs concerned are projected to pay dividends averaging $380 million a year, a significant increase on the last 5 years because the government is focused on better performance of these companies. However, Treasury's assumption about finance costs shows that the holding costs of these assets are around $800 million a year. That is, the interest costs are more than twice the expected future dividends.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, does the return on state-owned enterprises that he's discussed include special capital distributions worth more than $1 billion, which take the total shareholder return on those assets to over 16%? And is that why Treasury has advised that to realise the economic benefits of privatisation, a, quote, significant proportion of ownership by foreign investors would be essential to achieve the government's objectives?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, it's a bit odd that Labour are campaigning against...
Order. No, the answer shouldn't start with what Labour may or may not be doing. A question was asked, and whether the Minister likes it or not, it was more or less within standing orders, more or less. There was a fact inserted to it that the Minister can dispute, but he shouldn't start by talking about what the opposition or Labour Party might be doing. The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes, there were capital dividends, and guess what they came from? They came from the SOEs selling assets to foreigners. And that is where the $1 billion came from, the foreigners who bought the assets of the government SOEs.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question.
Order. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Order. Would an example of those transactions be the purchase by Meridian Energy of Southern Hydro in Australia, the building up of that asset and the selling again of that asset at nearly $1 billion profit, which profit was returned to the New Zealand taxpayer, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, yes, I can confirm exactly that. Meridian went and invested in some energy assets in Australia, built those up, sold them to foreigners for hundreds of millions of dollars, pocketed the cash from the foreigners and brought it back to New Zealand. That's exactly what happened. We, however, are proposing to sell to New Zealanders and put the cash back into New Zealand.
Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister. What other ownership models for these types of assets is he aware of?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, one of the sensible things the previous Labor government did, one of about two, I think, was to set up Air New Zealand, when it purchased it, as under the mixed ownership model, where the government retains, I think, about 75% of the ownership, and 25% of it is listed on the New Zealand Stock Exchange, which is owned by Kiwi mums and dads, KiwiSaver, ACC, and probably some foreign owners, but there's no restrictions on that, apparently, no restrictions on that. I've also seen this model being touted by the Chinese government of all, who apparently are the communist government, who are putting many of their SOEs into the mixed ownership model, just in the same way as the Labour Party put Air New Zealand into the mixed ownership model.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Can the Minister distinguish between buying back an airline which has been bankrupted by its private sector board and management
Order.
and purchasing and developing an offshore asset which was never originated in New Zealand and which he opposed, and selling down New Zealand assets already owned by Kiwi mums and dads, when he has said he wants New Zealanders to be at the front of the queue but has no way to prevent them on selling those assets to foreign multinationals?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I didn't actually understand the question, because I think Labor now find themselves trying to make distinctions they didn't think they'd have to make, like how to distinguish selling large-scale Meridian assets to foreigners and pocketing the cash. That was Labor policy, and New Zealand selling some of Meridian to New Zealanders and pocketing the cash. That's a pretty interesting distinction.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Has the Minister of Finance read the reports of the comments of the then Leader of the Opposition when he opposed the purchase and development of Southern Hydro, which resulted in a $600 million profit for the New Zealand taxpayer?
The Honourable Bill English, insofar as he's responsible for any of that.
Mr Speaker, no, I don't recall that, but I think it is. I don't recall, but I do recall that the Labor Party's policy is opposed to selling assets first, and secondly, selling them to foreigners. It's just that they did it when they were in government.
Question number 4, Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.